I've known you for a while. Tell us a little bit about this book you're writing and why you're writing it.
Hi, Joy. I'm really feel really honored to be on this call with you and be able to share my knowledge, my experience, time. I'm writing the book to help other people realize that you can come from a variety of difficult or bad, violent backgrounds growing up, and you can still come out a healthy, whole, and complete human being. In my childhood, I was physically, sexually, and mentally abused, which culminated into abusive relationships in my adulthood. And in the end, I ended up getting addicted to drugs.
So can you tell us about the title of the book that you're writing? Because I think it's quite profound that you've been able to move to the level that you have in your own personal work so that you've been able to help people in Vancouver and other areas. So tell us about your book.
So my book is called Higher Than I've Ever Been: Healing Addiction Inside Out. Because what I've learned on my journey since I came into recovery just over 9 years ago, and it really, really, truly is an inside job, because all of those things that happen to us when we're children, and for myself and a lot of other people I know that are in recovery, it's those things that we need to look at and deal with in order to move onward and upward in our existence, and the pure resilienceness that we have as human beings. And I think a need and a want to get back to heart-centered life, regardless of where we've come from and the things that we've done. Like I said, I think the most important thing for people to realize and understand is that when we are in the situations that we're in, addiction, abuse, whatever it is, that is not who we are at our heart center. Who we are at our heart center are loving, compassionate human beings. However, when we're in those situations, we live in fight or flight mode, which makes us do things that we need to do to survive, depending on our skill set, depends on what we actually do in order to survive. So being able to realize and understand that that is not who we are at our core, and through doing work like in a recovery program and doing the 12 steps, etc., we can get back to ourselves, and then we can become who we were always meant to be, because we were not meant to be the people that we ended up turning out like. Well, I was actually on Vancouver Island,
Hmm.
and before I went to Vancouver to go to recovery after my granddaughter was born. And but in the end of my addiction to crack cocaine, I was homeless and living on the edge of the reserve in an abandoned building in Duncan, and that was the safest place that I had felt for a very, very long time. So when I went to Vancouver and I went to recovery after about a year and a half, I ended up working for an organization called Embers, and they worked with a lot of people in recovery, people that needed a hand up, not a hand out. It was a nonprofit temp agency. And so we help people carry on to the next step, which is getting back out to work and becoming a productive part of society, because that's a big one for us when we're in addiction and we're not being able to contribute to life as a whole. It's very debilitating for us within ourselves,
Absolutely. It's like being dislocated from who you are and what you have to contribute.
on top of everything else that you're already feeling and going through because of where you are, where you've ended up.
So what are the most valuable things people can do to help you or that our systems could do? If you could change the systems, how would you do that?
I would make, there is such a small window of time when somebody in these situations feels that they can get the help that they need. And the problem with that is there's just not the facilities available for people to just go and say, okay, I want help now. And people people in those facilities, like the corrections industry and stuff like that, they need to be heart centered. So they need to take programs like the correctional officers where they're coming from a compassionate place, and they understand that this is not who these people are. It's who they've had to become in order to survive in society the way that society is in this day and age. And but once people can understand that you can get back to who you are truly within yourself, depending on the people that are approaching you and how they're coming across, and having some empathy and compassion is huge to us, especially when we're in that small window of time where we want to make the change.
So what you're saying is you need really fast service. You don't necessarily need wraparound services all the time, although that's nice. But the most critical point is at the point of leverage when someone says, "I want help." We need services and the ability to help them right then, not put it off 3 days or 3 weeks because it fits some government structure's
Or half
calendar.
an hour or an hour.
Yeah.
Like the time window is so small. But on the wraparound, we do need that as well, because it's there's lots of people that go into like a 28-day, they call it a spin dry cycle.
Uh-huh.
And some people that works, but the majority, I don't think it does. Like when I went into recovery, I was 47 years old, and I'd been drinking since I was 11, not all the time, but that was the first time I got drunk. And I was in first and stage recovery houses until I was almost 2 years clean and sober, because I had to learn a whole new way to live and survive and live life on life's terms without doing what comes natural, which is picking up. And
Sure.
it's it's not even that you want to pick up, it's that it's what's familiar. It's like being in an abusive relationship. You stay in it because it's safe to a degree, and at least you know what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. The other side of the fence, you know it's greener, but that's a scary place to try and get, because you don't know if you're going to succeed.
Sure. And you don't even know what it's going to look like or how it's going to behave.
Exactly.
So when you talk about wraparound services, you're not talking about corporate or governmental wraparound services. You're talking about a whole more of a holistic, almost community based, where you've got a whole new way of being able to feel safe in a community, working with people who you feel safe and you can trust that the house is going to be there, or the door is going to be open, and that you can go get food, and that you can talk to people who can help you. Would you say that that's true?
Yes, and I think residential treatment is, there are day programs out there, but then you leave, and if something goes wrong in that time between when you go back the next morning, chances are you're going to end up picking up or end up back in the same situation. So I think residential treatment is extremely important, and I think it's important to be with people running those facilities for the most part who are also in recovery, because they can relate. If you've never been an addict or an alcoholic, you can maybe have some understanding and compassion for where the person is, but you cannot relate because you've not been there yourself. So you don't know really the possibilities of what can happen. And a few counselors that have recently read my book have, they've said that's one of the biggest things that they've got for their own practices, is that they can now understand like how far it goes and what goes on in our heads, because our heads are sick when we're in addiction. It's really sick.
Sure. And I'd like to say that that's part of why we're doing our conference today, is because
Yeah.
we want to talk not just about what happens inside the person who's in trouble, quote unquote, but we need to understand how this kind of thinking perpetuates out in our society. And then our society becomes sick because we're not paying it. We don't know, from a collective intelligence standpoint, how everyone else is working, and it becomes, poor behaviors compounding poor behaviors. So rebuilding ourselves is pretty important, I think. Would you agree?
Oh, totally. It's huge. It needs to be a community thing, because I mean, people look at people in the downtown east side and they just think they're losers, and they're like, why don't they just stop? And it's like, it's not that simple, because if it was that simple, trust me, we would stop. But It doesn't work like that. It takes time because we've got all these issues from our childhoods, excuse me, for the most part, and that's what we're hiding. That's what we're covering up because it's just too hard to face them. And the more stuff we do, the more shame and guilt that we get within ourselves, which we have to use again in order to cover up that. And it's such a repetitive, sad cycle.
So immediate, so really trauma intervention and or interception so that you can regain equilibrium, emotional equilibrium, so that you can start to recover your core is the thing that has to happen in that moment, that half an hour, that 3 hours, wherein you're ready to make a shift. You need someone who can do trauma interception at that point, emotional trauma interception, in order to help you tip the scales the other direction so you believe you can get out. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody who who really understands, and they're not just there because that's what they do for a job.
Yes. Thank you so much, Janette. Is there anything else that you feel needs to be, that you would really like to, is there anything else that you could say that you really want to share with the people in this group?
Yes, I would. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how far down the rabbit hole you are. If you have that one little spark of light that you want something different, if you can gain enough momentum on that within yourself from your heart center, you can, I guarantee you can re I want to say replace or fix, but that's not what it is. You can heal yourself from what's gone on in your life. And it's hard. I'm not going to tell you it's easy because it's not. And there are times that I felt like getting loaded, but that means going back to where I came from. And I want to move forward. And we all have within us the spirit to move onward and upward. And we can succeed because most of us people in addiction, we're extremely strong. We have to be in order to survive out there. So if you can use that survival in order to perpetuate your future, then you can hit a home run.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janette. We really appreciate your willingness to put yourself out there. I'm really looking forward to having your book in print. And thank you again and keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thank you, Joy.